The sea is vast, endless, and filled with secrets hidden beneath its shimmering skin. Waves crash softly, carrying whispers that have traveled for centuries. Some say the ocean remembers more than the land, keeping stories no mortal can hold. Among these mysteries lies one tale, older than empires and deeper than time. It speaks of a temple not built by human hands, but born of tides and silence. A temple guarded not by stone walls, but by a presence vast and unseen. The sailors who dared to dream of it woke with salt on their lips and fear in their eyes. They whispered of columns that reached like towers, glowing with coral and pearl. And circling in the shadows, a shape too immense to name, older than the stars. The Leviathan, they said, was not a monster, but a guardian of balance and memory. Poseidon himself, lord of oceans, walked these halls of silence and light. This story is not of conquest or war, but of wonder, reverence, and awe. Tonight, we open that ancient door and listen to the sea as it speaks. Let the currents carry us to the hidden temple and to the truth that waits. The ocean holds a voice, soft yet unending, carried through waves and woven into salt and wind. On calm nights, when stars shimmer above, sailors swear they can hear it in the gentle roll of tides. It is not thunder, not storm, but something quieter, a murmur older than memory itself. They lean over the rails of their ships, listening to waters that seem to breathe like living things. The whispers come like fragments, drifting in and out, as if telling a story half forgotten. Some say it is the sea speaking. Others believe it is the echo of gods asleep in the depths. The words are never clear, yet the feeling lingers, wrapping sailors with awe and unease. Legends tell that Poseidon once let his realm sing, so mortals might hear the memory of oceans. The currents, moved by his trident, carried voices of coral reefs and ancient swaying kelp. Every ripple, every crash of wave, was a sentence written in water, unreadable by the careless. The most attentive sailors, however, caught glimpses of meaning hidden in the watery chorus. They spoke of a name repeated often, like a note held forever, whispered without end. Leviathan. The sound of it was heavy, vast, like something too large to fit into human speech. The name drifted across centuries, passed from sailor to sailor, ship to ship. And always, it came with the vision of a temple buried under waves beyond mortal sight. No one had seen it, yet all knew its shape, as though the ocean itself painted it in dreams. Columns tall as cliffs, carved not by human hand, but by time, pressure, and the hand of gods. Arches where fish swam in endless circles, and doors sealed by silence alone. When the sea whispered of this temple, men fell quiet, their hearts pulled toward the unseen. They spoke softly, for fear that to raise their voice would wake something sleeping below. Fishermen on moonlit shores claimed the tide carried more than shells and driftwood. They claimed the waves brought messages, words of the deep too strange to ignore. Children gathered around fires and listened, their eyes wide at the mention of Leviathan. To them, the guardian of the deep was not a beast, but a mystery waiting to be understood. Stories grew, bending like reeds in the wind, yet always returning to the same refrain. The sea whispers, the temple waits, and the Leviathan listens. Poseidon, restless and watchful, stirred whenever mortals spoke these words aloud. For he knew that whispers are never idle. They are the first signs of memory awakening. And memory, once awake, cannot be silenced, for it carries truth across time itself. The sailors did not know whether to fear or to welcome these whispers. They only knew the ocean seemed alive, as though guiding them to a place unseen. Their voyages grew stranger, their dreams filled with corridors of stone under shifting tides. Voices followed them into waking hours, urging them to seek and to listen. Not every sailor answered the call, but those who did were never quite the same again. They returned with distant eyes, staring past horizons, hearing echoes no one else could hear. Some left their ships and walked inland, yet claimed they still felt the sea beneath their feet, as though the whispers had bound them to tides that never released their hold. The ocean had chosen them, carried them into its story, wrapped them in its hidden song. And all began with a murmur, a gentle voice rising in the foam and falling with the wave. The whispering currents carried secrets from the beginning of time to the present night. And whoever paused to listen found themselves standing at the threshold of a forgotten temple. The sea waited, patient as eternity, knowing its story was only just beginning to unfold. Beneath the endless waters, Poseidon stirred, his trident resting lightly against the shifting currents. He was lord of oceans, yet his gaze moved beyond tides and storms toward something hidden, unresolved. The sea, usually calm beneath his will, pulsed with rhythms he had not set in motion. It was as though another heartbeat echoed beneath the waves, steady, deep, and unrelenting. Poseidon knew the language of currents, the songs of whales, the silence of trenches. Yet this sound, this pulse, felt older than even his reign, older than Olympus itself. He walked along coral palaces and fields of kelp, his steps stirring schools of silver fish. Everywhere he went, he felt the same hum, vibrating against his skin, whispering in silence. It followed him through caverns where lanternfish glowed, through reefs that swayed like temples alive. The god frowned, for gods rarely admit when they sense something beyond their control. But Poseidon was no stranger to mysteries. He was born in them, shaped by them. He remembered the time when oceans were wild, untamed, and filled with voices no one heard. Back then, even he had listened to deeper powers sleeping in the bones of the sea. Now, those powers seemed to stir again, their presence brushing against his vast dominion. He thought of the Leviathan, the guardian whose name carried through centuries of whispers. Not an enemy, not a servant, but something apart. Something as ancient as tides themselves. Poseidon had not seen it for ages, yet he felt its watchful gaze in the dark. The temple, too, weighed heavily in his mind, though no mortal knew its true origin. It had not been built, not in the way men built cities or shrines to the gods. The temple was grown, shaped by currents, carved by silence, sanctified by memory. Poseidon sensed it awakening, its song vibrating through sand and shell, rising to reach him. The restlessness within him was not anger, but anticipation, a knowing that change had begun. His realm was vast, stretching beyond sight, yet even he could not bind what had stirred. Above, sailors felt only whispers, but he felt the full weight of the awakening tide. The Leviathan, keeper of the temple, had shifted, and the ocean itself responded in kind. He rose from his throne of coral and pearl, the seafloor trembling as he moved. Creatures of the deep followed his motion, shadows drifting behind his immense, radiant form. He journeyed across undersea plains where wrecks of forgotten ships lay silent, covered in moss. Through all these paths, the same sound accompanied him, steady, low, endless, undeniable. Poseidon closed his eyes and let the current carry him, listening with the patience of eternity. The hum spoke not of war or ruin, but of awakening, of memory returning to light. It reminded him that the sea itself was alive, that it carried truths older than gods. He thought of mortals who dreamed of the temple, guided without knowing by this ancient song. It was no accident. The ocean chose them, as it had chosen others in forgotten ages. Poseidon's restlessness deepened, not from fear, but from the gravity of what was to come. For when the temple stirs, the balance shifts, and every wave carries a different weight. The god of the sea, powerful and unyielding, felt himself listening rather than commanding. The ocean no longer waited for him to speak. It was speaking to him instead. And in that moment, Poseidon knew the whispers of mortals were only the beginning. The true story was about to surface, drawn upward by currents no force could restrain. The sea does not only whisper. Sometimes it reaches into the minds of those who drift upon it. On restless nights, when stars dim and clouds press low, sailors dream dreams not their own. They see waters without end, stretching in silence, a horizon swallowed by shadow and glow. From that vastness rises a vision, immense and haunting, the image of a temple below. Its pillars rise like mountains, covered with coral gardens that pulse with soft blue light. Fish swim through, arches too wide for ships, doors framed by pearls and stone grown alive. The sailors turn within the dream, but always the shadow appears, circling, unending, immense. It coils around the temple like a ribbon of night, scales glittering with echoes of stars. They cannot name it, yet the ocean whispers the truth into their sleeping minds. Leviathan. Some wake gasping, hands clutching at sheets, eyes wide with fear they cannot explain. Others wake calm, a strange peace upon them, as if touched by the sea's eternal patience. Each dream feels more real than waking, each vision heavier than the weight of daylight. The mariners speak in hushed tones, afraid their words might summon what they have seen. Around firelit decks, they share fragments, each story fitting into the next like waves. One describes the endless halls within the temple, filled with carvings none could read. Another speaks of songs in the water, voices deep as trenches, resonating like thunder restrained. A third insists the Leviathan's eye met theirs, not in threat, but in recognition, in knowing. The crew grows restless, for dreams are not easily ignored when repeated across many nights. Some pray to the gods, begging for protection, while others fall silent, listening for signs. The sea itself seems to shift in answer, currents carrying them farther than charts predict. Stars overhead twist into patterns that remind them of arches, spirals, and unseen doors. It is as if the dreams are not only visions, but invitations written in starlight and tide. The mariners grow divided, some eager to follow, others fearing the depth's hidden truth. Yet no one can deny the pull, the sense of being guided toward something greater. One night, a captain, old and steady, admits he too has dreamed the same dream. His voice trembles, not from fear, but from reverence, for he knows such visions are rare. He tells of Poseidon's presence, faint yet certain, standing within the temple's great hall. The god does not speak, yet his silence is a command, a promise, a call. The Leviathan moves beside him, neither foe nor ally, but a balance embodied in shadow. The sailors listen, their faces lit by lantern glow, their hearts caught between fear and awe. They know their lives are small against the immensity of gods and guardians of the sea. Yet they also know the dreams have marked them, binding their fates to the deep. Night after night, the visions continue, each one clearer, each one heavier with meaning. They dream not only of the temple's walls, but of corridors that shift like living water. They dream of voices chanting, not in words, but in tones that shake the soul. They dream of doors that open without touch, leading into chambers of light and memory. And always, at the center, the Leviathan coils, vast, silent, watching, eternal. The sailors begin to understand these dreams are not warnings, but a preparation. The sea is teaching them, guiding them, shaping their minds to accept its truth. By day they see the ocean differently, no longer as water, but as a living memory. By night, the temple grows closer, its shape etched deeper into their restless minds. The mariners stand between worlds now, half in waking, half in dream, chosen by the tide. And though none can say why, all know the journey has already begun within their sleep. The dreams did not fade with sunrise. Instead, they grew heavier, clinging like salt to skin. By day, the sailors worked, yet the memory of the temple lingered in every crashing wave. At night, the same visions returned, guiding them deeper into mysteries they could not resist. It was as if the sea itself had placed a hand upon their shoulders, urging them on. Whispers that once seemed distant now rang louder, like chants rising from below the keel. Some claimed they heard footsteps on the deck, though no one stood in the lantern light. Others swore the water gleamed with shapes of arches, appearing only to vanish in foam. The ship moved with a will of its own, sails filling even when the winds were still. The compass spun uncertainly, pointing not north, but somewhere downward, toward the waiting deep. In the silence of midnight, Poseidon appeared to them, not in fury, but in radiance. His figure rose like a tide, trident gleaming, hair flowing like kelp in unseen currents. The sailors did not tremble. Instead, they felt a calm weight, the gravity of presence. He spoke not in words, but in thoughts that washed through their minds like waves. You are chosen to witness. You are called to remember. You will see what lies below. The crew felt his intent, more powerful than speech, binding them to a path unseen. He did not command obedience, nor demand sacrifice, but invited them into his restless knowing. The invitation was heavy, yet none turned away, for their dreams had prepared them. When Poseidon vanished, only the sound of the sea remained, steady, endless, unavoidable. The sailors gathered on the deck, each face lit with the glow of moon and fear. They spoke little, for all knew the meaning, though none dared put it fully to voice. The ocean was no longer a journey, but a summons, and they were no longer free. One sailor whispered, "We are being called." His voice shook, yet no one disagreed. Another asked, "By whom?" But the answer had already been given in their dreams. The Leviathan waited, and the temple stirred, and Poseidon's hand guided them onward. The horizon seemed to bend, the stars shifting into new constellations unknown to mortal eyes. Every direction pointed toward the same truth. The deep itself was their destination. The days grew strange, the sea calm beyond reason, as if the world held its breath. Flocks of birds circled the ship, though no land lay near, their cries sharp and fleeting. Schools of fish swam beside the hull for days, glowing faintly with unearthly light. The crew felt they were being escorted, guided by more than wind and wave. Each night, the visions returned stronger, showing more of the temple's halls and Leviathan's form. The sailors woke with salt on their lips, as if they had breathed underwater. One night, the captain dreamed of walking inside the temple, Poseidon waiting at the altar. The god turned to him, and though no words were spoken, the meaning was clear. "Follow, and you will see. Resist, and you will forget." The captain woke trembling, but his resolve was firm. The course was already chosen. He gathered the crew and spoke softly. "We are not lost. We are being led." Some wept, some bowed their heads, others clenched their fists in silent acceptance. The sea itself seemed to listen, waves lapping softly against the wood as if approving. From that moment, the ship became more than a vessel. It was part of a ritual. Every plank, every sail, carried them closer to the truth waiting beneath the surface. And though no one said it aloud, all knew they could never turn back again. The call had been heard, the choice already made, the journey sealed by God and sea. Ahead lay the shimmering abyss, the temple's glow, and the eye of the Leviathan itself. The sea remained unnaturally calm, as if the world conspired to give the sailors no escape. They began to notice currents, invisible to the eye, yet felt through the pull of the ship. The waters beneath carried a secret rhythm, guiding them along lines no map had ever shown. At dawn, the captain spread an ancient chart on the deck, its surface cracked and yellow. It was said to be passed down from a sailor who vanished near the forgotten trench. No ink traced its paper. Instead, faint grooves shimmered only under the silver of moonlight. When the light touched, the lines revealed paths not of land, but of hidden ocean roads. The crew gasped, for the patterns mirrored their dreams, spirals leading toward a glowing abyss. The captain whispered, "This is not a map of places, but of tides older than time." One sailor traced the spirals with trembling fingers, feeling heat rise from the grooves. Another swore the lines pulsed faintly, as if alive, breathing with the rhythm of the sea. That night, the visions deepened, showing arches of coral rising like cathedrals beneath waves. The temple appeared again, closer, clearer, its stones breathing as if made of living bone. The Leviathan's shadow lingered, massive and patient, circling the temple with slow, eternal grace. Some sailors woke crying, not from fear, but from awe too heavy for their hearts. The captain called a meeting, lantern light swaying as the ship rocked on still waters. "Poseidon has placed us on a path. We walk it now, whether willing or unwilling." He tapped the strange map, and the spirals glowed brighter, as if to confirm his words. Silence fell, broken only by waves brushing gently against the hull like whispers of assent. Then, one young sailor asked, "What lies at the end of these spirals?" The answer came not from the captain, but from the sea itself, deep and resonant. A voice pressed into their minds. The beginning of remembrance, the temple of all tides. The sailors shivered, for the thought was not foreign. It had lived in their dreams. From then on, the map was no longer an object, but a companion, pulsing in moonlight. It grew brighter each night, guiding them, shifting its lines with the changing currents. When storms gathered on the horizon, the spirals shimmered, bending their course into safety. When the stars disappeared, the grooves glowed, pointing the way as if replacing constellations. Each sailor took turns watching it, feeling both dread and devotion in equal measure. One whispered, "We are no longer sailing the sea. We are sailing memory itself." The words rang true, for the water grew stranger, glowing softly at their passage. Fish of impossible shapes swam beneath, some with eyes like lanterns, some with translucent bones. None harmed the ship. Instead, they circled it as if paying respect, guardians of passage. By the seventh night, the spirals on the map converged into a single luminous point. It pulsed with slow certainty, like a heartbeat beneath the waves, steady and commanding. The captain placed his hand upon it and felt the weight of the ocean press back. Visions filled his mind. Poseidon raising the temple, Leviathan bowing in eternal covenant. He gasped, yet did not withdraw, for the god's will was flowing through him. The sailors watched in silence, knowing the moment bound them beyond return. They had become keepers of a truth too vast for words, guided by Poseidon's current. As dawn rose, the map darkened, its glow fading, its grooves returning to faint lines. Yet the course remained clear, etched not in parchment, but in the hearts of the crew. They no longer needed stars or compass. The sea itself had become their guide. Every wave carried them closer to the temple's gate and the Leviathan's waiting eye. And though no one spoke it aloud, all felt the same unshakable truth within. The journey was no longer theirs. It belonged to the sea, to the god, and to time. The sea stretched endless and still, a mirror of sky that held no wind, no storm, only silence. For days the crew drifted without struggle, the ship gliding forward as though carried by unseen hands. The horizon blurred, vanishing into mist, until water and sky became a single silver veil. At night, the stars flickered strangely, moving in arcs no sailor had ever charted before. The sailors whispered of omens, but their voices carried no fear, only solemn acceptance. Then one dawn, the sea shifted. It no longer floated but pulled, dragging them downward. The waves stilled, yet the current beneath grew fierce, guiding the vessel toward a deep spiral. The map of currents, once faint, began to glow again, with spirals tightening into a point. The sailors leaned over the rail and saw the water shimmer with light from far below. Shapes rose in the glow, arches of coral, spires of stone, and paths paved in pearl. It was not a dream now, but a vision alive, drawing them closer with every tide. The ship tilted, not sinking, but descending as if the ocean itself had opened a door. The crew clung to ropes, yet none cried out. Awe bound their tongues into silence. One sailor whispered, "The sea is swallowing us." Another answered softly, "No, it is welcoming us." As the descent deepened, schools of radiant fish swirled like constellations, illuminating their path. Whales moved alongside, their songs low and mournful, echoing in the sailors' bones. Each note seemed a prayer, a hymn guiding them into the ancient heart of the abyss. The captain stood tall, eyes fixed on the glow below, whispering, "We are almost there." The deeper they sank, the lighter the water became, glowing as if filled with captured dawn. Coral forests stretched beneath them, branches weaving into arches like cathedral ceilings. Statues lined the ocean floor, carved from stone yet worn smooth by endless currents. Some bore the likeness of men, others of gods, all gazing upward with silent reverence. The sailors realized these were witnesses of ages past, guardians of memory, eternal and still. Their ship slowed as the current gentled, rocking softly in the cradle of the deep. Then they saw it. The first gate of the temple, vast and luminous, carved into the trench. Two colossal pillars framed the entrance, glowing faintly with runes older than the oldest tongues. The runes pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat, as though the temple itself breathed with the sea. A hush fell across the crew, for they felt the presence of something greater stir. The Leviathan's shadow passed above them, vast and patient, circling the temple's crown. No fear gripped them, only a strange calm, as though the creature's watch was a blessing. The ship settled before the gate, motionless, as if waiting for the crew to choose. The captain stepped forward, lantern in hand, though the glow of the gate lit the sea. He turned to his men and spoke softly. "This is not a place of trespass, but of trust." One by one, the sailors nodded, their hearts aligned, their purpose bound by Poseidon's will. They lowered the anchor, though the sea itself seemed to hold them steady in place. No storm roared, no current dragged, only silence wrapped around them like sacred cloth. In that silence, the sailors heard a voice, deep, patient, endless as the sea itself. Enter and remember, for the sea keeps what the land forgets. The crew closed their eyes, listening, their souls trembling with the weight of the words. When they opened them again, the temple doors had begun to part, slow and radiant. A corridor of light stretched within, beckoning them, filling their lungs with salt and wonder. The descent was complete. The threshold was before them. The journey was no longer forward. It was downward, inward, into the memory of the sea, into Poseidon's eternal sanctuary. The gates opened wider, spilling light like rivers, a glow that shimmered across the sailors' faces. They stepped cautiously, yet the water did not crush them, nor did it choke their breath. Instead, it cradled them, wrapping their lungs with air that tasted of salt and ancient storms. The ship drifted forward, crossing the threshold as though the sea itself bore them inside. Within lay a vast hall, its walls carved from coral that glowed faintly with shifting currents. Pillars rose like trees of stone, entwined with kelp that swayed though no wind was near. The sailors whispered, but even their hushed voices echoed, carried endlessly through watery chambers. Mosaics shimmered along the walls, depicting tides, storms, and gods striding across rolling waves. In one mural, Poseidon stood tall, trident raised, his gaze meeting that of a vast beast. The Leviathan, coiled in spirals, loomed beside him, not as enemy, but as companion, eternal. The sailors stared, awed, realizing the temple was not built for worship, but for remembrance. This was a record, a chronicle of sea and God, preserved where time could not erode. They walked deeper, passing through arches that led into chambers filled with drifting light. Statues lined the paths, their faces calm, eyes closed as if dreaming in endless prayer. Some statues resembled mortals, sailors, and wanderers, each immortalized in coral and stone. Others bore the faces of beings unknown, shapes lost to myth but alive in memory. The captain brushed a hand along a statue and felt warmth, as if it still breathed. Whispers filled the chamber, not spoken by tongues, but resonating within their minds. All who enter become witnesses. All who witness become keepers of tide and time. The crew listened, hearts heavy, for they knew they had crossed into a covenant eternal. They paused before a vast dome, its ceiling painted with stars that shifted like constellations. Unlike the sky above, these stars moved, forming spirals, aligning with the map of currents. At the dome's center stood an altar, shaped of pearl, gleaming softly like captured moonlight. Upon it rested a conch shell, larger than any man, glowing with steady silver radiance. The sailors gathered around, sensing the weight of ages resting within its spiral form. The captain stepped forward, his hand trembling as he reached toward the shining conch. As his fingers touched its surface, the temple pulsed, a low hum shaking coral walls. The Leviathan's shadow passed across the dome, and the sailors felt its eye upon them. Not a gaze of threat, but of recognition, as though they had been expected all along. The conch vibrated softly, releasing a sound that was both song and memory intertwined. Visions poured into their minds, of seas rising, temples built, gods walking upon the waves. They saw mortals welcomed, chosen to carry the memory of tides back to their kind. They saw the covenant between Poseidon and Leviathan, a bond that shaped the ocean's law. The sailors staggered, overwhelmed, yet no fear gripped them, only reverence too deep to bear. The captain raised the conch, and the sound grew louder, echoing across every chamber. It was a call not of war, but of unity, binding sea god, beast, and man. The sailors wept silently, for they felt themselves no longer wanderers, but keepers of truth. The temple walls shifted, glowing brighter, showing more of its eternal halls. Corridors opened like veins of light, stretching into depths yet unseen. The Leviathan's shadow lingered above, circling, watching, guarding, as if blessing the moment. Poseidon's presence washed over them, not in form but in weight, the gravity of the deep. You are keepers now. You will remember when the world forgets. The words etched into their souls, permanent as tides, undeniable as the pull of the moon. Silence followed, vast and holy, until the conscious glow softened back into steady light. The crew lowered their heads, bound by awe, bound by the sea, bound by eternity. The temple had accepted them, and the memory of the ocean now lived within their hearts. Their journey was no longer toward discovery, but into guardianship, eternal as the tides. The sailors wandered deeper, their steps guided by the soft glow pulsing through the coral halls. Each turn revealed another chamber, filled with relics of seas forgotten by the living world above. One chamber shimmered with suspended bubbles, each holding scenes of storms, calm tides, or wandering ships. The crew gazed, realizing these were not illusions, but memories, preserved fragments of the ocean's vast story. One bubble revealed a fisherman casting nets, another showed children playing by the surf, timeless and alive. The sailors touched nothing, for instinct told them these were sacred, fragile echoes of countless lifetimes past. They moved on, hearts heavy with reverence, until they came upon a chamber shaped like a spiral shell. Its walls curved inward, lined with glowing scales, iridescent and endless, like the body of something immense. The captain paused, feeling the weight of eyes unseen, as though Leviathan itself lingered beyond the walls. The silence there was thick, yet within it, a pulse echoed, steady as the heart of the sea. At the spiral's center stood a pool, dark as midnight, yet shimmering with constellations upon its surface. The sailors drew closer, and within the pool they saw reflections not of themselves, but of futures untold. One man saw a village by the shore, safe and flourishing, as if guarded by unseen hands. Another saw distant storms turned aside, waves bending gently instead of crushing lives without warning. The captain saw his ship, not lost to the sea, but sailing forever under skies calm and kind. The vision stirred hope, but also fear, for they hinted at responsibility as much as blessing. The pool rippled, and a voice whispered without sound. The sea remembers, but it must also be remembered. The sailors bowed their heads, understanding now that memory was not gift alone, but burden eternal. They turned from the spiral chamber and entered another, vast and filled with statues shaped of pearl. Each statue bore an offering, shells, tridents, tokens of sailors long since gone to forgotten tides. One statue held a lantern still glowing faintly, though no oil nor flame kept it alive. Another bore a scroll of seaweed pressed into stone, words preserved though language lost to time. The crew realized they were not the first to stand here, nor would they be the last. This temple was a chain unbroken, binding ages through memory, through those chosen to enter its halls. As they walked, the ground trembled gently, not with threat, but with presence vast and close. The Leviathan's shadow stretched across the ceiling, scales glinting faintly like constellations born beneath the waves. No fear gripped the sailors now. Instead, awe filled them, heavy and steady as the tide itself. They felt watched, not with malice, but with patience, as if the beast measured their worth in silence. The captain raised his eyes and spoke softly, his words lost to water, yet carried by thought. "We will remember. We will keep the tides alive, as you have asked, as Poseidon commands." The temple pulsed in response, a wave of light rushing through its coral bones and pearled halls. The statues glowed softly, as though nodding in agreement, as though acknowledging their new guardianship. The sailors knew then their voyage was changed, no longer of discovery, but of covenant unending. They had entered as wanderers seeking wonder, but they would leave as keepers of the sea's truth. The glow dimmed back to calm, and silence returned, but it was a silence filled with trust. The pool, the murals, the relics, each was now bound to their memory, etched into their souls. The Leviathan circled above, silent, vast, eternal, guardian not only of temple but of covenant renewed. The sailors closed their eyes, hearts aligned with tide and storm, ready for what awaited in the deep. The sailors pressed onward, guided now by instinct more than light, their path carved by the temple's will. They passed through corridors that narrowed like rivers, opening suddenly into halls vast as oceans themselves. Each hall carried a different rhythm, some pulsing like a heartbeat, others still and silent as the abyss. The crew moved slowly, reverently, their breaths measured, for each step felt as though the sea itself watched. In one chamber, they found towering spires of crystal, each humming with a note that echoed eternity. The notes blended, weaving a melody that seemed endless, like waves rising and falling without ceasing. The sailors listened, entranced, and realized this was the ocean's song, a hymn sung since the dawn. No hands had carved these crystals. They had grown as tides do, shaped by time and Poseidon's gaze. The captain reached out, his fingers brushing the surface, and the sound deepened, resonating with his soul. Visions bloomed once more, whirlpools forming, currents shifting, and a Leviathan swimming beside Poseidon in silence. The sailors fell to their knees, overwhelmed not by fear, but by reverence that swallowed every thought. They rose again, their faces wet with tears though no water flowed, only the weight of truth. The temple did not bind them with chains, but with memory, with knowledge that could not be undone. In another hall, they found murals carved in shifting sand, held firm by unseen power of the sea. The murals moved as they watched, retelling tales not with words, but with images flowing like waves. They saw mortals lost at sea lifted gently back to shore by Leviathan's passing shadow. They saw sailors who prayed in storms, shielded by currents, their vessels carried beyond destruction's reach. The crew realized then that Leviathan was not doom, but guardian, keeper of balance in chaos. The sea did not destroy without cause. It remembered, and in memory, it preserved what must endure. The sailors bowed once more, humbled by the vastness of mercy woven into depths they once feared. As they moved forward, the air thickened, and the halls curved into a dome vast and glowing. At its center rose a column of water, suspended, flowing upward though no source fed its stream. Within the water swam visions of stars, galaxies, and storms, an entire cosmos mirrored in liquid form. The captain approached slowly, heart racing, sensing this was no mere vision, but the heart of the temple. He reached out, his palm grazing the surface, and the water wrapped around his hand, like silk. A voice emerged, deep and endless. "You have seen, you have remembered. Now you must carry." The sailors felt the words within themselves, as though spoken directly into the marrow of their bones. Their journey was no longer theirs. They were now bound as messengers of the sea's eternal covenant. The column swirled faster, and from its depths emerged a shape vast, coiling, shimmering with endless light. Leviathan appeared, not in full form, but in vision. Eyes vast as horizons, gaze deep as eternity. It circled within the water, then bent its great head as though bowing to the gathered crew. The sailors trembled, yet no terror came, only awe too great to bear without bending in return. The captain lowered his head, whispering, "We will remember. We will keep the tide alive within us." Leviathan's eyes glowed, and the columns surged, sending waves of light through the temple's every chamber. The murals shone brighter, the crystals sang louder, the statues gleamed, all in response to the vow. The sailors clutched their hearts, feeling the sea itself, imprinted there, permanent, eternal, unshakable. The voice returned, softer now, like the hush of waves against sand. "Then you are chosen. You are keepers." The water stilled, the vision faded, but its presence lingered, heavier than any storm or tide. The sailors looked to one another, and in their eyes burned the same light, the same vow. They had crossed into legend, no longer merely wanderers, but eternal witnesses of the sea's truth. The temple quieted, yet every sound within them carried its memory, a song written upon their souls. And Leviathan's shadow lingered above, not as threat, but as guardian, as promise, as eternal tide. The temple grew quieter as the sailors advanced, as though each step carried them deeper into timeless silence. They entered a hall unlike the rest, wide and circular, its floor patterned with spirals of glowing shells. The spirals shimmered faintly, radiating warmth like sunlight upon water, though no sun had ever touched this place. At the hall's center stood a sphere of glass, floating gently, filled with swirling tides of luminous blue. The crew surrounded it cautiously, sensing power within, like currents condensed into a single, fragile form. The captain placed a hand near the sphere, and waves of memory rushed through him like rushing surf. He saw Poseidon carving the seas with his trident, shaping currents and guiding storms with deliberate will. He saw Leviathan swimming alongside, massive yet graceful, binding chaos into balance with every sweep of tail. The visions were not violent, but beautiful. Creation flowing as art, a dance between God and beast. The sailors gasped, for they too felt glimpses. Villages by coasts thriving, sailors welcomed home after perilous tides. The sphere pulsed, and the spirals on the floor began to glow brighter, drawing patterns across the chamber. Those patterns rose into the air, forming maps of seas past, present, and seas yet to be. The sailors realized they stood in the chart room of the ocean, a place where destiny was drawn. The lines of light shifted, forming storms, calms, migrations of whales, and even paths of wandering ships. The captain whispered, "This is the ocean's memory, a map alive, carrying all that ever was and will be." The hall trembled softly, and from the sphere came a low hum, like the voice of deep waters. The voice filled their minds. To know the sea is to carry its burden. To carry it is to serve. The sailors bowed instinctively, acknowledging their role, their bond etched deeper with every vision shown. One sailor wept softly, realizing his children would sail one day under skies shielded by Leviathan's covenant. Another clenched his hands, feeling pride that their voyage was no accident, but chosen by the sea. The captain stood tall, heart heavy with duty, yet lifted by the honor laid upon their shoulders. The glowing spirals slowed, dimming, until the chamber returned to stillness, holding only a soft glimmer of light. The sailors lingered, unwilling to leave, for the air itself felt like sacred tide wrapping around them. But the temple guided them forward, opening another passage, its arch shaped like waves frozen in motion. They entered and found themselves in a hall vast and high, its ceiling hidden in shimmering shadows. From above, streams of silver light fell like waterfalls, but no source could be seen in the dark. The light gathered in pools on the ground, reflecting the sailors' faces, not as they were, but as they could be. One man saw himself as a teacher, telling stories of the sea to children by the shore. Another saw herself guiding ships through storms, her hand steady, her voice firm as tide. The captain saw himself older, seated by fire, telling of Poseidon's temple as myth, yet memory true. The reflections faded, leaving the sailors shaken, yet strengthened by the glimpses of what they might become. They understood. The sea not only remembered the past, but shaped the future through those it chose. The hall pulsed, and the Leviathan shadow appeared once more, gliding across the silver light like eternal moon. It did not descend, but circled above, watching, silent and vast, affirming what had been given. The sailors knelt, knowing their vow was now bound to future generations as much as to themselves. The temple's voice returned, softer, almost tender. You are threads in the tide. Through you, memory endures. The hall dimmed, the spirals of shells glowed faintly once more, and silence reclaimed the chamber. The crew rose, their steps heavier yet steadier, carrying both the burden and the gift of memory. They walked onward, guided by light unseen, deeper into the heart of Poseidon's eternal temple. The sailors reached the final hall, vast and open, where the sea itself seemed to breathe through stone. The walls curved high, etched with tides, moons, and suns, as if the temple held the rhythm of time. At the center lay a great circle of pearl, polished smooth, reflecting light that came from nowhere. The crew gathered there, feeling the air thick with presence, heavier and yet calmer than any storm. The Leviathan's shadow fell once more, gliding slow and eternal, as if sealing the covenant forever. Then came a voice deep as tide, neither thunder nor whisper, but the truth of ocean given shape. You have entered, you have seen, and you have carried. Now you must return, for memory must live. The sailors bowed, knowing their time within the temple had ended, though its truth bound them always. The captain lifted the conch from his side, holding it aloft, and it gleamed like a moon reborn. The sound that followed was neither song nor call, but a tide moving through their hearts as one. The temple pulsed, coral glowing, walls shifting, as if bowing to their vow before letting them go. The sailors felt themselves lifted, the weight of water vanishing as light poured through every corridor. They blinked, and the temple was gone, replaced by calm seas under stars, bright and endless. The ship drifted quietly, untouched by storm or wave, as if the sea itself carried them home. The sailors stood in silence, hearts heavy with what they bore, yet steady with what they had become. They were no longer wanderers chasing wonder, but keepers of memory, bound to tides eternal. The captain looked to the horizon, whispering words carried by wind. The sea remembers, and so shall we. Days passed, yet no storm touched them. No current turned against them, as if Leviathan guarded still. At night, the stars above seemed to echo the constellations they had seen upon temple walls. They told no outsiders of their voyage, for truth of the temple was not meant to be given lightly. Instead, they shared fragments, songs of waves, tales of guardians, whispers of a god's watchful eye. Children listened, their faces bright with wonder, not knowing the storytellers were witnesses of truth. The crew aged, but their vow remained, carried through their voices, etched in their dreams, lived in silence. And when each sailor passed, the tide took them gently, as though returning them to Poseidon's embrace. The temple endured unseen, waiting for others, hidden deep where time could never erode its memory. Leviathan circled always, vast and eternal, watching over the covenant that bound sea god and man. The ocean breathed on, storms rising, calms falling, yet always balanced by the hand unseen. The memory lived not in stone alone, but in those chosen to witness, to carry, to remember. The ship sailed on, its wake vanishing into moonlit waves, yet its purpose now endless as tide. For they had walked the halls of Poseidon, seen Leviathan's gaze, and borne the sea's eternal truth. And though the world above might forget, the ocean would remember through its keepers, through its song. The sailors smiled through quiet tears, knowing their voyage would never truly end, only ripple onward. The sea spoke still in their hearts, steady, patient, vast, calling them not to wander, but to keep. Poseidon's temple faded into legend, yet its truth remained alive, flowing eternal as the tide.